Tonight on The Best Times, we focus on two organizations that are remembering history. We examine the link between loneliness and aging. And we'll tell you how to care for your aging teeth. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you. Hello, I'm Chris Hardaway. Welcome to this edition of The Best Times, a series that looks at life after 50. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "We are not makers of history, we are made by history." The lives of veterans from World War II to the present have been shaped by the history of their times, and that is worth remembering. Tonight on The Best Times, we visit with two organizations that are dedicated to remembering history. On the third Thursday of every month, dozens of veterans, most from World War II, gather at the Germantown Baptist Church for a luncheon presentation, sponsored by Forever Young, a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to honoring veterans for their service. Diane Height is the founder of Forever Young. She sees these meetings as therapy for the men and women who may have repressed their memories of events that happened over 70 years ago.
They get such a healing from just being together. I don't know what it is. I don't know if healing is the right word. There's just comfort. Maybe that's the word. They get a comfort from being with one another and just knowing that they went through combat and they understand. There's just something special about them being together.
Diane knows from personal experience how valuable these gatherings can be to veterans and their families. Her father came home from World War II an alcoholic.
My family suffered because of his alcoholism, which I have no doubt it stemmed from World War II. And I think a lot of families have suffered because of the war, not realized it. And so I think it's interesting that I can take the pain of what we went through and use it to bring healing to not only our World War II veterans, but to their families. And so it's just amazing how you can take bad and bring it or make it into something good.
In the crowd today are mostly World War II veterans, with a scattering of vets from Korea and Vietnam. They greet one another like old friends who have shared a common history. And they talk about everything from the weather to old war stories. Diane began these meetings as an outgrowth of Forever Young's founding mission of granting World War II veterans wishes to return one last time to their battlefields. Every year, Diane accompanies veterans on trips to Washington, D.C., Normandy Beach, or Pearl Harbor. She's even taken veterans halfway around the world to return to Iwo Jima. So far, Forever Young has made over 20 trips, granting the wishes of dozens of World War II veterans who find a sense of closure in the forests of Belgium or the sands of Normandy. Earl Williams was a 21-year-old staff sergeant in the Army Engineers when he came ashore on Utah Beach with the third wave of invasion forces on D-Day. 71 years later, his daughter convinced Earl to go back to the battlefield.
I was afraid of how I would act emotionally, because I can get to thinking about it and talking about it and almost tune up even now, and that's as long as it's been. And to see it again, it just completely changed. I'm sure glad I went that time. I sure am.
Every one of these veterans has a story. This is Willie Phillips. He flew on B-17s and B-29s in both Europe and the Pacific, but he doesn't remember any of it. A piece of shrapnel in his brain left him with amnesia. When he came home from the war, he didn't even recognize his own mother.
But he had all these holes in his memory. Do you know he met a man here that went through training with him? So he and his wife and the guy that he went through training with and his wife, they went out to dinner, and he sat down and told him about training, and he's like, yeah, you got a B-29, and he said, you went here, and he started filling in some of the holes in his memory.
At today's meeting, the veterans are participating in a talent show. But the entertainment and the hot lunch is just a backdrop for the real purpose of these meetings. The opportunity to bring old warriors and their families together before the memories fade forever.
I like to say, as you throw a stone into a pond and you just see the ripple effect, that's exactly what happens with Forever Young. You'll see it in the healing in the lives of our veterans, and then it just trickles out to the family members and to the community, and it just goes on and on and on.
On a Tuesday afternoon, history students from Lausanne College School are setting up equipment to interview World War II veteran Eddie Spencer. As a private in an artillery battalion, Eddie spent nearly 3 years fighting across North Africa and the length of Italy. Today, he will share his memories with these students and make history come alive as part of the Chapman Wood Oral History Project at Lausanne.
The historians can tell us a lot of the big ideas, and the historians can tell us how we should think about these or how we should remember these stories. But the oral history interviews give us minute details or really personal details, and also kind of show you the big picture aside, how these events affected, they affected real people. When you talk about the bravery, you talk about the sacrifices that people had to make, here's a very real one. It drives home the messages that we try to communicate to students in a way that's really beyond us. So these interviews, I think, not only they can be potentially cathartic experiences for the veterans, they're learning experiences for our students, but for the families of those being interviewed, they're priceless artifacts.
Veterans from every conflict, from World War II to the present, have been interviewed. And the program has recently expanded to include the oral history of the Civil Rights Movement. In addition to being a valuable teaching tool, these interviews are submitted to the Library of Congress, where they are archived and can be viewed online, preserving this priceless oral history before it is lost to time. Here's a brief excerpt from one of last year's student productions.
They drafted me when I was 17, and I didn't say nothing about going to war or anything like that, but I went because that's what I had to. But after I've been what I seen and what I seen over there, if they called me back again, I'd go right today.
For me, thinking about my friends is what got me through it. Because for me, going to war, it wasn't, oh, let's protect America. It was more, these are my brothers, and these are the guys, they're watching my back, I've got to watch theirs, or if there's a weak link, it all falls apart.
You were very brave.
Huh?
You were very brave.
No, I wasn't. They say I promise you I wasn't. I just did it because they told me to.
When I seen over there how they destroyed the people, killed the people, destroyed the land, stuff, I didn't want it to happen here. That's why I said I'd go back again, in my age.
Eddie Spencer is talking about the battle in Italy, where he earned a Silver Star. Russell Williams feels that the experience of shooting and editing these interviews makes his ninth graders not just better history students, but better citizens.
I was just expecting it to be like a normal history class, you know, get the facts, you take a test and move on. I was not expecting anything like this.
I didn't know that much about the Vietnam War, which the veteran I interviewed had been a part of, and so I not only learned about the plot points of that, like the evacuation of Saigon, which I had no idea happened, and he was there, and it was cool because I went home that night and I Googled it, and he said that he was there pushing helicopters off of amphibs, and I Googled it and I could see pictures of people pushing helicopters.
I learned a lot about how it was a hard journey for them, and you don't really see that a lot of the time when you just read about history, but now you could see all the emotions that they had to go through and how difficult it was to be a part of the war.
I said to someone, I said, you know, these men are the backbone of America. And they said, oh no, they're the heart and the soul too.
We all feel lonely at various times in our lives, but as we get older, loneliness can have a much more negative impact on us. In a study by the University of California, San Francisco, 43% of the seniors involved reported feeling lonely on a regular basis, and their loneliness affected their health. Isolated seniors were at a 59% greater risk of mental and physical decline than their more social counterparts. To find out more about the link between loneliness and aging, I talked with two experts, Pat Smith of Senior Resource Consultants and Dr. Paul Hill of the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. In talking about loneliness, loneliness doesn't know an age as far as I know. We've all been lonely at different ages in our lives. But the question I have is, can loneliness be more serious as we age, as we become older?
Well, certainly I think that's a possibility. In reading about loneliness, it was noted that the general population, 20% report themselves as lonely, but the elderly population, 43% reported themselves as lonely. So I don't know that it's inevitable as we age that we become lonely, but certainly it is proportionally higher as we age.
Let's define some terms, because being alone is not the same as loneliness, correct?
Loneliness is really a feeling that you have internally, and being alone is a state of aloneness. So when you think about the differences between those things, you can have this emotional feature whether you're in the presence of other people or whether you're alone.
Now, you hit up on something I want to talk about, the health-related issues that can be related to loneliness. What are some of the health-related issues?
The three that come to mind are really risk of infection, cardiovascular risk, and problems with continued mobility and stamina.
Is there a link between loneliness and depression?
I believe that having the symptom of loneliness could actually come before having depression, but certainly loneliness is an integral part of having depression, as well as certain anxiety disorders that are common in the elderly. Some people, a very few number of people, have loneliness, and that's a part of their personality, that they feel isolated, or they feel lonely, or they have a lack of connectedness with other people. We certainly know that the elderly are at a higher risk for loss, and the loss can lead to a loneliness that they'll need to find ways to overcome.
Yeah, in that context, of course, as one ages, you may lose a spouse, you may lose all of your close friends, they may die before you. it sort of leads me to what we talked about earlier, the fact that one of the myths of aging is that loneliness is inevitable simply because of death. Everybody's dying out around you. Is loneliness inevitable in aging?
I don't know that it's inevitable. The factors are certainly there. So certainly as we age and experience losses, there's an emptiness, a big gap in our life. But it depends on that person's particular coping skills, how they fill that gap and how they can heal from that loss that they've had.
Let's talk about technology for a moment. Social media. Does social media play a role here in loneliness? Can social media keep one from feelings of loneliness, or is technology not capable of doing that?
I think it's a wonderful tool if it's used appropriately. You know, it's great that a woman might be able to stay in close connection through text or email with her college-aged granddaughter. So I think it can work in a very positive manner to have social media available. But I think it's also a landmine. You know, when someone who is not really savvy about the internet and so on is on the internet, scams and people who can take advantage of you just seem to come out of the woodwork. And so then you're extra vulnerable. And once you get stung, like you mentioned earlier, once you get stung, you withdraw, and then the loneliness begins to cycle and become more of an issue.
So we talked about the mental and physical dangers involved in loneliness as we age, but is there a way that we can avoid loneliness? What's the antidote here?
My belief is to have an open mind and not be closed-minded to something that's new. Your life is changing, which means that you need to change along with it. And sounds like a very simple concept that if all your friends have died, that you certainly meet some new friends. That sounds like a simple concept, but it's really hard for people to disconnect from those old friends and have the willingness to make new friends that may not be exactly like their old friends, but they need to be, these older adults need to be open-minded to change.
Is there a formula for making those new friends? How do you go out and making those new friends when you're 80 or 90 years old?
Exactly. Well, I think that's when prevention is better than the cure. All through your life, you should be making intergenerational friends, not waiting until you're 89 to reach out to your 40-year-old neighbor, you know, but to connect all along as you're able to, so that you do have a history with friends. I think when you have a loss of friends, what you're losing is that history that you've had together and that familiarity and nostalgia. So to start out making brand new friends, there just isn't that history anymore. And so I think prevention, by doing it all through your life, having a diversity of friends and acquaintances, can certainly lend itself to fending off loneliness, preventing it in that respect.
Can getting involved with life, being in clubs or volunteer activities or church activities, I mean, does that help one develop the friends that one would need to avoid loneliness?
I think so. I'm a big believer that people should stay engaged with lots of different groups of people and stay involved with that group. Like you said, whether it's the senior center, whether it's a church group, whether it's the place that we all go to exercise, whether it's a club, music, dance, whatever you like to do, you should do it and keep doing it. Because you're going to lose members in that group. Certainly as we age, people that we know and love are going to pass. So we need to have that interconnectedness of a group that's in motion.
Mm-hmm. And certainly I think that connection and being part of a group is so validating and so important in terms of a support network. I remember when Michael Jordan retired from basketball, he said the thing he would miss most was being part of a team. And I thought, what an insightful thing, that's important, that we're part of a team or a group. And if you don't show up for coffee on Tuesday morning, somebody notices and calls you to find out if you're okay or what's going on. It's an incredible network of support. Even though they may not be close friends, it's still people who care that you are on earth and that something is going on with you and wondering where you are and what you're doing.
And we all need that.
We sure do. Yeah.
Pat Smith and Dr. Paul Hill, thank you for being on The Best Times.
Thank you.
George Washington, the father of our country and our first president, suffered from dental problems all his life. In fact, by the time he was inaugurated as president, Washington had only one of his original teeth remaining, and that one had to be pulled in 1796. Washington's teeth probably fell victim to a combination of poor diet, disease, and genetics. If you'd like to avoid his dental problems, follow this advice to care for your aging teeth. How does aging affect our teeth?
Aging of teeth is something that can vary depending on the circumstances of the aging person. Certain things will happen and do happen to almost everyone's aging teeth. One is the enamel gets thinner. You're brushing your teeth for 40 years, you're going to wear some enamel off. If you're chewing foods, if you eat a lot of grains, you're going to grind a lot of enamel off the tops of your teeth.
Does dental care change as we age?
We have to be more careful. Whatever we did in the way of maintaining our teeth as a younger person, it becomes more and more important that we do it better or more often as we get older. Because as we age, we lose some of our youth and our ability to combat disease. Our immune system is less effective, our digestive system is less effective. So certainly it becomes more and more important as we get older to do the proper things that we can do to promote health in our mouths and our systems.
What is dry mouth?
Dry mouth is very common in elderly people, over 65, let's say that category. There's a wide variety of medications that have dry mouth as a side effect. And this compromises the health of the tissues. When the patient's ability to produce saliva is impaired, they're much more prone to tooth decay. Oftentimes a physician can change medication that will help this. The patient can do things for themselves, like just prophylactically keep a glass of water at hand all the time and just take a sip, slosh it around in your mouth, and keep your mouth wet during the day. If you're retired and you're at home, you can usually do this.
What is the most common problem of aging teeth?
The biggest cause of tooth loss for people as they get older is gum disease. And this is unnecessary tooth loss. And most of it is because it's either unidentified or untreated. So if you're not going for checkups, you're not going to be aware that you have it. And where tooth decay hurts if it gets too deep and you have to go because you want to sleep at night, gum disease doesn't hurt most of the time until it's in the final stages, and then it's too late.
What is the effect of smoking on dental health?
When I got out of dental school, we worried about smoking because it stained the teeth. Now we know it's far more serious than that. You know, it compromises the tissues around the teeth, their ability to, for blood circulation, it diminishes blood circulation. It's definitely a contributing factor for gum disease. In fact, nowadays, if you're interested in getting an implant, that's one of the negative factors for discouraging you from getting an implant, is if you're a smoker.
How can we protect our aging teeth?
The statistics are pretty glaring. I mean, people lose a lot of teeth that they don't need to lose, and if they had just gotten to it early, it wouldn't have happened. If you get to a good comprehensive dentist, have him keep track of you and have him keep you up to date on what you can do to prevent problems, you're much better off.
For more information on caring for your aging teeth, go to the Adults Over 60 page at the website of the American Dental Association. Want more information about life after 50? Go online to watch more shows and find more resources. And send us your feedback and story ideas to besttimes@wkno.org. That's all for this edition of The Best Times. Please join us next week for more stories about life after 50. Until then, I'm Chris Hardaway. Thanks for watching. Good night. Funding for The Best Times is provided by the Plow Foundation, striving to do the greatest good by helping the greatest number of people since 1964. Additional funding is provided by the members of WKNO. Thank you.